Most people believe fat loss happens when they're sweating in the gym, but biologically, that's wrong. Exercise is only the signal. The real decision happens later while you're asleep. Every single night, your body enters a metabolic window where it chooses one of two paths. Either it burns stored fat for fuel, or it locks that fat in place and defends it aggressively. The difference is not motivation. It's not discipline. It's chemistry. Your body runs on a hierarchy of hormones, and timing matters more than effort. When you fall asleep, your metabolism doesn't shut down. It switches leadership. During the day, cortisol dominates. Cortisol keeps you alert, mobilizes energy, and raises blood sugar. At night, a different hormone is supposed to take over human growth hormone. HGH repairs tissue, preserves muscle, and aggressively targets visceral fat for fuel. These two hormones cannot operate at the same time. When cortisol stays high, growth hormone is locked out. This is where most people unknowingly sabotage fat loss. Modern life keeps cortisol elevated long after sunset. Artificial light, late meals, caffeine, mental stimulation, and unresolved stress all tell the brain that the day is not over. When cortisol remains high at bedtime, insulin often stays elevated as well. This combination creates a metabolic blockade. Fat cells become inaccessible. Your body physically cannot enter fat-burning mode, no matter how hard you trained earlier. Visceral fat is especially sensitive to this environment. Unlike the fat under your skin, visceral fat is hormonally active. It responds aggressively to stress signals. When cortisol is elevated, visceral fat becomes protected, not burned. From the body's perspective, high stress means danger, and danger means energy must be stored close to vital organs, not released. This is why so many people do everything right during the day and still wake up with stubborn belly fat. The mistake isn't effort. It's timing. Fat loss is not a 24-hour process. It's a night shift operation. And if the night shift never clocks in, nothing changes. Sleep is not passive rest. It is an active metabolic event, but only if the hormonal environment allows it. If cortisol is high when your head hits the pillow, your body remains in defense mode. If cortisol drops, the system shifts. Haywire begins, fat oxidation increases, inflammation decreases. The same 8 hours produce completely different outcomes. The goal is not to force fat loss through more stress. That only strengthens the body's defenses. The goal is to engineer the evening so the body feels safe enough to let stored energy go. That requires a deliberate transition from alertness to recovery. And that transition doesn't start in bed. It starts hours before you sleep. To understand how to unlock fat burning at night, you need to understand one critical concept. Your body cannot repair and defend itself at the same time. These two states are biologically incompatible. Defense is driven by cortisol. Repair is driven by growth hormone. And whichever one is dominant when you fall asleep determines what your body does for the next 8 hours. Cortisol is not evil. It is essential. It wakes you up, sharpens focus, and mobilizes energy so you can respond to threats. But cortisol is designed to spike and fall. In nature, stress was brief, a chase, a fight, a problem that ended. Modern stress doesn't end. Emails, screens, financial pressure, constant stimulation, all of it keeps cortisol elevated well into the night. When cortisol remains high in the evening, it sends a clear message to your physiology. Danger is still present. And when the body perceives danger, it does three things automatically. First, it raises blood sugar to keep energy available. Second, it suppresses growth hormone because repair is not a priority during emergencies. Third, it protects visceral fat because stored energy near vital organs is considered survival insurance. This is why intense late-night exercise, heavy mental work, or emotional stress before bed can backfire. Even though exercise is healthy, when done too late, it can act as another stress signal. The nervous system doesn't distinguish between productive stress and harmful stress. It only measures intensity and timing. Another critical player here is insulin. Insulin and growth hormone compete for dominance at night. Elevated insulin blocks fat release and interferes with deep sleep. Late meals, especially those high in sugar or refined carbohydrates, keep insulin elevated when it should be falling. This creates a hormonal traffic jam. Cortisol stays high, insulin stays high. growth hormone never gets access. The result is a wasted metabolic window. Your body spends the night managing blood sugar and inflammation instead of burning stored fat and repairing tissue. You wake up tired, inflamed, and unchanged, even if you exercised earlier. The solution is not extreme restriction. Starvation is also a stress signal. The goal is to send a consistent message of safety. When cortisol drops and insulin settles, growth hormone rises naturally. This is when visceral fat becomes accessible. The body wants to burn fat at night. That is its default state, but only when the environment allows it. Fat loss doesn't happen because you push harder. It happens because you remove the signals telling your body to hold on. This means the real fat-burning strategy is not adding effort. It's removing interference, and the most powerful interference happens in the evening, long before you fall asleep. By the time most people get into bed, the decision has already been made. Fat will either be burned or defended, and the body doesn't decide that in the dark. It decides it in the hours leading up to sleep. This is where environment becomes more powerful than willpower. Your brain uses external cues to determine whether it is safe to shift into recovery mode. Light, temperature, movement, and mental load all feed into this decision. If those signals suggest it is still daytime, your biology stays in alert mode. Cortisol remains elevated, and fat burning stays locked. Light is the strongest signal. Your eyes are not just for vision. They are hormonal sensors. Specialized cells in the retina respond aggressively to blue light. When exposed in the evening, these cells send a message to the brain that it is still midday. Cortisol stays active. Melatonin is delayed. Growth hormone release is pushed back or suppressed entirely. This is why bright overhead lights, phones, and televisions late at night quietly sabotage metabolism. Temperature is the next factor. Deep sleep and fat oxidation require a drop in core body temperature. If your body stays too warm, the nervous system stays partially activated. Light meals, alcohol, and warm environments all raise internal temperature when it should be falling. Without that temperature drop, you struggle to enter the deepest stages of sleep where fat-burning hormones are released. Mental stimulation plays a similar role. Unfinished tasks, constant notifications, and unresolved stress keep the brain in problem-solving mode. From a biological perspective, an unresolved problem is a threat, and threats keep cortisol elevated. This is why many people feel exhausted but wired at night. Their bodies are tired, but their nervous systems are still on duty. Movement timing also matters. Low-intensity movement earlier in the evening can help discharge stress hormones. Walking, stretching, or light activity communicates forward motion and safety, but intense training too close to bedtime can send the opposite signal. The body interprets it as a demand for performance, not recovery. All of these inputs combine into a single outcome. Either your environment tells your body the day is over, or it tells your body to stay alert. There is no neutral state. Fat loss at night is not accidental. It is programmed, and most people unknowingly program their bodies to store, not burn, by keeping their evenings over. The solution is not perfection. It is consistency. Consistency. When the body receives the same calming signals night after night, cortisol begins to fall earlier. Growth hormone release strengthens. Visceral fat becomes less protected. Your body doesn't need motivation. It needs permission. And that permission is granted by how you design the final hours of your day. Once you understand that fat burning is controlled at night, the goal becomes simple. You must help the body switch shifts. Cortisol needs to clock out. Growth hormone needs to clock in. And that transition doesn't happen by accident. It happens through a deliberate sequence that signals safety to your nervous system. The process begins with timing, food. Insulin is one of the strongest blockers of fat release, especially at night. When you eat too close to bedtime, insulin stays elevated and competes with melatonin. This prevents deep sleep and suppresses growth hormone. Ideally, your last substantial meal should happen 3 to 4 hours before sleep. This creates a fasting window where insulin falls and fat becomes accessible. For people still adapting, a small protein-based snack can stabilize blood sugar without triggering insulin spikes. But the long-term goal is metabolic quiet. Next comes light control. Overhead lighting and screens are artificial daylight. They keep cortisol elevated by telling the brain it is still noon. 2 hours before bed, lighting should shift low and warm. Lamps instead of ceiling lights. Screens dimmed or filtered. This allows melatonin to rise naturally, which in turn helps quiet insulin and lower cortisol sensitivity. Temperature is the next lever. Deep sleep requires a drop in core body temperature. A warm shower or bath before bed may seem counterintuitive, but it works by causing blood vessels to dilate. When you exit into a cooler room, heat dissipates rapidly, and your core temperature drops. This sudden shift accelerates sleep onset and supports deeper sleep stages where fat oxidation occurs. Mental load must also be addressed. Anxious thoughts and unfinished tasks keep the nervous system alert. Writing down everything you need to remember tomorrow externalizes the stress. The brain receives a signal that the threat is contained. This reduces cortisol driven by mental noise. Finally, breathing controls the last switch. Slow, extended exhales activate the vagus nerve and shift the body into parasympathetic mode. This is the final clearance signal. When the nervous system relaxes, cortisol falls. Growth hormone rises. The night shift begins. When these signals align, your body stops defending visceral fat. Instead of managing inflammation and blood sugar, it spends the night repairing tissue and burning stored energy. You wake up leaner not because you force fat loss, but because you remove the signals telling your body to hold on. Fat loss is not about punishment. It is about alignment. When the body feels safe, it lets go.